The sky was dark and broken, full of smoke and fire. The war had destroyed everything, even hope. Captain Jake Carter, a human soldier, walked alone across the empty land of a forgotten moon. His ship had crashed 3 days ago, and no rescue came. His food was gone, his water was low, and his leg was bleeding. Still, he kept walking. One step at a time, he looked around and saw only ruins, old alien buildings, burnt machines and bones. This moon was dead, just like the war had left it. Jake stopped near a broken wall and sat down, breathing hard. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small silver wrapper. It was the last thing he had, his final chocolate bar. He smiled a little, remembering Earth, the warm sun, and his sister who had given it to him. He opened the wrapper slowly, as if it were gold, and broke the chocolate in half. But just as he raised it to his mouth, he heard a soft sound like a whisper. He turned fast, his hand on his blaster, ready to fight. But there was no enemy. No monster, no soldier. There was only a girl. She sat behind a pile of rubble, thin, dirty, and shaking. Her clothes were torn, and her face had dust and old scars. Her eyes were big and dark, and they looked right at him. But she said nothing. She looked so small, so lost, so poor. Jake lowered his weapon, heart beating fast. "Hey," he said. But she didn't answer. He looked at his chocolate bar, then at her again. She looked hungry, very hungry. He stood up slowly and walked to her, holding out one half of the bar. "Here," he said softly. "You need it more than I do." She looked at it, then at him, then back at the chocolate. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, with shaking hands, she took it. She put it in her mouth and closed her eyes. Jake watched her face as she tasted it, like it was the first sweet thing she'd ever had. Then something strange happened. Her eyes opened wide, glowing faint blue for a second. Jake blinked, not sure if he saw it right. She sat up straighter, her body no longer shaking. The dust on her skin seemed to fall away like dry leaves, and then she smiled. Jake stepped back, confused. That smile, it wasn't normal. It was calm, powerful, almost royal. Before he could speak, the ground below them shook gently. Like a heartbeat, he looked around, thinking it was another moonquake, but the girl stood up, strong now, no longer weak. She looked at the sky and whispered something in a voice that didn't sound like hers. "He has returned," she said. Jake froze. "What did you say?" She didn't answer him, just walked past him toward the ruins. Machines buried in the ground began to glow, one by one. Old lights turned on, and broken towers hummed with energy. Jake stared in shock. This place was dead, but now it was waking up because of her. "Wait," he said, following her. "Who are you? What is this place?" Still no answer. She moved like she knew exactly where to go. Jake had no choice but to follow, half scared, half curious. He didn't understand, but he felt it deep inside. He had just started something big, and there was no going back. The girl reached a large metal door, hidden behind vines and ash. She raised her hand and placed it on a round stone beside the door. It lit up with blue symbols that floated in the air. The door opened with a low hiss, revealing a dark hallway filled with old alien tech. She turned and finally looked at Jake, her voice soft but clear. "Come," she said, the first word she truly spoke. Jake stared at her, heart racing. This wasn't just some poor alien girl. This was something else, something ancient, powerful, and maybe dangerous. And all he had done was give her half of his last chocolate bar. He followed her into the darkness, not knowing where it would lead. But one thing was clear now. She wasn't what she seemed. The air inside the underground hallway was cold and silent. Jake followed the girl closely. The only sound was their footsteps echoing on the metal floor. She didn't look back, didn't speak, just walked forward like she belonged there. Strange lights lit up one by one as she passed them, glowing blue and green. Jake had never seen technology like this, not even during his time in the war. It felt old, but not broken. It felt alive. He couldn't stop thinking about what she said before. He has returned. Who was she talking about? Why had her eyes glowed after eating chocolate? Was that some kind of key? Jake's thoughts ran wild, but he kept moving. His blaster was in his hand now, just in case. The hallway opened into a huge round chamber, filled with strange machines and floating symbols. Some looked like control panels, others like weapons or tools. But all of it was foreign to him. In the center was a tall platform with glowing rings above it. The girl walked straight to it and stopped, placing her hand on a smooth black stone. The room answered her touch, lights pulsing around them, machines. Waking up from sleep, Jake stepped closer, trying to understand. What is this place? He asked, but she said nothing. Instead, she looked at the center of the platform, where a beam of light shot down from above. A screen appeared in the air, showing symbols, then images, strange cities, ships in the sky, and her, the girl, stood there in the same clothes, but cleaner, her face glowing with light. Crowds knelt before her, and machines followed her voice. She was no normal girl. She had been someone important, someone powerful. Jake stared at the images, then looked at her again. You're not some lost child, are you? He said softly. Still, she didn't reply, but her eyes met his, and for a moment, he saw something deep inside them. Pain, maybe, or loneliness, but also something cold and ancient. The ground shook again, not from inside, but from above. Jake turned quickly, listening. It sounded like ships, heavy ones, landing outside. The girl looked up too, her eyes sharp now, alert. Without a word, she reached down and pulled open a hidden panel in the floor, revealing a second tunnel. She motioned for Jake to follow, and he did. This tunnel was tighter, darker, but smoother. The walls had carvings, like stories told in stone. One showed a figure like her, standing over a fallen army, her hand raised as ships bowed to her. Another showed that same figure inside a crystal, locked away while enemies cheered. Jake stopped, staring at that carving. You were trapped, he whispered. The girl turned and nodded slowly. Now it made sense, the way she had been silent, weak, like she had just woken up after a long sleep. And the chocolate, maybe it wasn't the chocolate itself, but something inside it, something human. He didn't understand the science, but he knew one thing: he had broken a seal without meaning to, and now the universe would know she was free. The tunnel opened into a hidden hangar, filled with old alien ships. Some were broken, some still humming with energy. The girl walked to a small scout craft and placed her hand on it. The ship opened its doors like it had been waiting just for her. But before they could enter, the sound of boots filled the tunnel behind them. Jake turned, raising his blaster. Shadows moved in the hallway, fast and silent. The girl looked at him, then at the ship, then back again. She didn't speak, but she didn't have to. Jake fired the first shot, covering her as she ran to the ship. The enemy came fast, dressed in black armor, their eyes glowing red. They didn't shoot to kill. They aimed for the girl, trying to capture her. Jake got hit in the shoulder but kept firing. The girl stopped at the ship's door, turned around and raised her hand. A deep sound filled the hangar like a song, but without words, machines lit up. Weapons moved on their own, and the ground itself shifted. The entire hangar came alive. Obeying her voice, the enemy froze, confused. And in that moment, the machines struck, lights, wires, and beams of energy flew through the air, forcing the enemy back. Jake watched with wide eyes as the girl stood in the middle of it all, glowing like a queen. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked ready. When the fight ended, she walked back to him and helped him up. He was bleeding, tired, and full of questions. She looked into his eyes and finally spoke again. "We are not safe," she said. "More will come." Jake nodded slowly. "Who are you?" The girl looked away, then back at him. "I was forgotten," she said. "But not anymore." And with that, she led him into the ship, the doors closing behind them. Above the moon, dark ships circled like vultures, scanning the land. But what they didn't know was that the girl had already awakened, and the human who gave her chocolate had just become part of something much bigger than he ever imagined. The ship moved through space like a silent shadow, flying low between moon craters and broken satellites. Jake sat inside, pressing his hand on his bleeding shoulder. Trying to stay calm, the girl stood near the controls, her hand resting on a glowing panel, guiding the ship without speaking a word. Her eyes were focused, cold, and distant. She looked like someone who had done this before many times. Jake had questions too many, but he stayed quiet. He didn't want to break the strange calm around her. The ship passed into a dark zone, an old mining field full of floating metal and rock. Here, sensors didn't work and signals were lost. It was the perfect place to hide. She landed the ship gently behind a broken asteroid station, hidden from enemy scans. Jake stood up slowly, his arms shaking from the pain. "Can we stop for just a second?" he asked, breathing hard. The girl turned and looked at him, her expression unreadable. She walked to him and placed her hand over his wound. Jake flinched, but then he felt something strange. Warmth spread from her palm to his skin, and slowly, the pain began to fade. The wound closed in seconds. Like time had reversed, Jake stared at her, speechless. "What ... did you do?" The girl looked down, almost shy. "You are useful," she said simply, and walked back to the console. He sat down, watching her closely. She was full of surprises, quiet but dangerous, young but ancient, and now she could heal. Wounds too. Jake's fingers tightened. Who was she really? What else could she do? The ship's screen lit up with red warnings, enemy ships nearby, searching. She leaned forward and placed her hand on the console again. This time, her voice came out in a strange rhythm, calm, powerful, not in human language. The ship responded. Instantly, changing shape slightly, hiding its energy signature. Even the metal seemed to bend at her words. Jake stepped back, shocked. "You're controlling the ship." "With your voice," she nodded. "They were made for me," she said. "Who made them?" "My people. Where are they now?" She paused, eyes flickering with sadness. "Gone." Jake felt the weight of that word. She didn't need to explain it. He understood something terrible had happened long ago. Her people had built great machines, given her power, trusted her, and then they vanished. The enemy ships passed by, not noticing them, and moved on. Jake let out a breath. But the girl was still tense. "They won't stop," she said. "They know I'm awake." Jake frowned. "Why are they after you? What are you to them?" She turned toward him slowly. "I was once a key," she said. "Now I am a threat." Before he could ask more, the ship's system flashed again. But this time it was different. A signal, weak from deep underground. An old beacon had activated on a nearby moon, one not marked on Jake's map. The girl stared at it, her eyes wide for the first time. "That is mine," she said. "It remembers me." Without asking, she set course, and the ship turned sharply, heading straight for it. The moon was small and covered in black rock, with only one strange tower in the center. They landed near it, dust rising around them. Jake stepped out and looked around. Everything was quiet, too quiet. The girl walked forward, her footsteps echoing strangely on the stone ground. As she approached the tower, the earth trembled slightly. A circle of light formed beneath her feet, and the door to the tower opened. Inside was no throne, no weapons, no guards. It was a room full of silent machines waiting, and as she stepped in, they lit up one by one, like they were happy she had returned. Jake followed slowly, eyes wide. He had never seen anything like this. Walls covered in moving symbols, floating screens showing stars he didn't know. Then, one screen shifted and showed something terrifying. Dozens of black ships, like the ones that had chased them, but bigger, heading toward Earth. Jake felt the blood drain from his face. "They're coming to my world," he said. The girl turned, calm but serious. "They will burn it to find me," she said. "Unless we stop them." Jake clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had no army, no backup, just a strange girl who could talk to machines, but somehow he believed in her. She wasn't poor, she wasn't weak, and she definitely wasn't alone anymore. Outside, the sky darkened as enemy scouts flew above, but deep below, 2 lives had already changed the course of war. A human who gave his last chocolate, and an alien girl who was never supposed to wake again. Jake stood in silence as the screen showed the enemy fleet moving toward Earth. Each ship looked like a black blade, sharp and cold. There were too many, more than he had ever seen during the war. His chest felt heavy, like a cold hand was pressing on his heart. The girl stood beside him, still and quiet, but her eyes burned with memory. She raised her hand and touched the screen, and it changed. It showed something from long ago. A city floating in space, shining with gold light. People with silver eyes and voices like music walked between towers, and in the center was a throne, and on that throne sat the girl. Younger, brighter, full of life. Jake watched as ships bowed to her command. Whole planets listened to her words. She was not just important, she was everything. But then the scene darkened, the sky broke open, and shadows poured in. Her people were caught off guard, their machines too slow to respond. Someone had betrayed them, someone close. Jake saw her image locked inside a crystal chamber, her eyes wide with shock, her hands reaching out, and then silence. The screen turned off, and the room dimmed again. Jake turned to her, unsure what to say. "You were their queen," he said. She didn't answer. "Why did they seal you away?" Still, no answer, but her hand closed tightly at her side. She walked to the center of the chamber and stepped into a ring of light. The machine scanned her body slowly, then released a soft chime. Another door opened, this time revealing a narrow stairway leading downward. Jake followed her without asking, every part of him filled with questions and fear. He didn't know what was down there, but something told him it mattered. The stairs led to a strange round room, darker than the others. In the center was a floating orb, black with tiny golden lights inside. The girl reached out and touched it, and a soft hum filled the air. Then Jake heard something, not with his ears, but in his mind, whispers, old and sad. He stumbled back, grabbing his head. "What is that?" he asked. "It remembers everything," she said quietly. "Even the things I forgot." The orb turned, showing images again, this time of Jake, him as a child, sharing food with others during a refugee mission, him protecting his squad during the war, standing alone against a mech unit, him refusing to leave a burning ship until every civilian was safe. Jake stared, confused. "How does it know about me?" The girl looked at him slowly, her voice softer than ever before. "Because I chose you." Jake felt a chill. "You chose me?" "When?" "When you gave me your last chocolate," she said. That was the final piece. He didn't understand, but he could feel the truth in her words. This wasn't just about kindness. Something about that moment had connected them. Deeper than blood, the orb floated between them and began to glow brighter. It scanned Jake again, this time showing something strange. The symbols changed, human DNA merged with something else. Jake backed away, heart racing. "What are you showing me?" "You were touched by our past," she said. "And now, you are not fully human anymore." The chamber shook violently, red lights flashing. A voice came through the ship's system. Enemy fleet had found them, and one destroyer was already in orbit. Jake grabbed his blaster, breathing hard. "We have to run," he said. "No," the girl replied, her voice cold and calm. "We fight." She raised her hand and called to the machines around them. Walls opened. Weapons came alive, long-lost technology answering her like loyal guards. Jake didn't know how he fit into all this, but somehow the machines turned to him too, scanning him. One of the weapons moved toward him, stopped, then opened, offering itself to him. He touched it, and it responded to him like it had known him forever. The girl stepped beside him, a glowing shield forming in her hand. "This is only the beginning," she said. Jake nodded, heart racing but steady. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was chosen, and now he had to become something greater, above. The planet, black ships began to fall like hammers from the sky. But below, deep in the hidden chamber of an ancient queen and her unexpected human ally, a forgotten power had just awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The sky above the old moon turned red as the first enemy ship entered the atmosphere. It moved like a beast, slow but heavy, its shadow covering the ground below, inside the hidden tower. Jake stood beside the alien girl, no longer just a lost stranger. Now she was power reborn, and he was part of her awakening. The machines around them were alive, waiting for her command. But something had changed. When Jake touched the weapon offered to him, it had responded, not just accepted him, obeyed him. Even the girl had noticed, her eyes sharp with surprise. She walked toward him, silent, studying him like a puzzle she hadn't finished yet. "This is not possible," she said softly. "What isn't?" Jake asked, holding the strange weapon. "You should not control this tech," she replied. "It was built for my kind." Jake looked down at the glowing symbols on the metal, now pulsing to match his heartbeat. "But it listens to me," he said. "Yes," she whispered, "and that's what makes it dangerous." The tower shook as the enemy ship fired its first warning shot. Rocks exploded outside, dust raining from the ceiling. Jake looked up, then back at her. "What do we do now?" The girl closed her eyes and spoke just one word. At once, the entire tower trembled, and the floor beneath them began to shift. The ancient base was bigger than it seemed, buried deep under the surface. Walls unfolded, and a hidden hangar opened below, revealing a long-lost command center. Hundreds of machines powered up, drones flew out like silver insects, and turrets locked onto the sky. But the strangest part was that half of them looked at Jake. Waiting, he stepped forward slowly, feeling the weight of every eye on him, human and machine. The girl turned to him and said something he didn't expect. "They are yours now," Jake blinked. "What do you mean?" "The bond has begun," she said. "The system has accepted you as co-ruler." "That's insane," he said. "I'm just a soldier." "No," she replied. "You are more than that." Before Jake could argue, the enemy ship landed hard, sending shockwaves across the land. Its side opened, and black armored troops poured out, fast and silent. Jake grabbed the weapon and felt it shift shape in his hands, turning into something between a rifle and a blade. He didn't know how to use it, but his body did. As if the weapon remembered battles from long ago, the girl stood beside him, her shield glowing, her eyes bright with energy. She didn't speak, didn't plan, she just moved, and Jake followed. They hit the battlefield like thunder. Machines at their backs, Jake's weapon fired beams of light that tore through the enemy's armor. He dodged, blocked, and struck like someone trained for years, but he hadn't trained. He was learning as he fought, and the machines were teaching him. Every move he made, they adapted, improved, trusted. The girl unleashed her power with her voice alone, commanding drones with one word, bending metal with another. Her songs were like codes, reshaping the battlefield. Enemy tanks crumbled at her command, and ships lost control mid-air. But even she noticed something. The machines were splitting their attention, half to her, half to Jake. When the last enemy soldier fell, the land was quiet again. Smoke rose from the ground, and pieces of broken armor burned in the dirt. Jake dropped to one knee, out of breath. He looked around at the battlefield and realized they had won. The girl stepped toward him slowly, her voice calm but serious. "This changes everything," she said. "Why?" "Because I am not alone anymore," she said. "The system has chosen you too." Jake stood up, confused and unsure. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said. "I didn't ask to be awakened," she replied. "But now we are both here." Suddenly, a new signal echoed through the machines. It wasn't an attack alert, it was a message. The signal came from far away, a deep part of space. Jake walked to the console and watched as a strange symbol appeared on the screen. The girl's face changed the moment she saw it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He knows." Jake stared at her. "Who?" She didn't answer right away, but her hands trembled for the first time. "He was the one who locked me away," she said. "The one who wanted all of this for himself. And now he's coming too." Jake didn't know his name, didn't know his face, but the look in her eyes said it all. This wasn't just a battle anymore. This was personal, and now Jake wasn't just helping her. He was standing in the path of something ancient and angry. Above them, the machines shifted, preparing for the next storm. Jake clenched his fists and looked at the sky. Whatever was coming next, he wouldn't run. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of something much bigger, and someone, somewhere far away, had just realized that the Forgotten Queen was not alone anymore. Asterisk, the ship was quiet as it floated in orbit above a dead planet. Inside, Jake stood alone in the central chamber, staring at his reflection in the curved black glass. His hands still glowed faintly. The strange power he didn't ask for, now pulsing just beneath his skin. He had fought side by side with her, bled with her, followed her into the unknown, but now he wasn't sure who he was anymore. Not fully human, not fully alien, and somehow both. The girl the queen sat on the edge of the command chair, silent, watching the stars. She hadn't spoken in hours. Since the signal came from deep space, her mood had changed. She wasn't afraid, but something about it disturbed her. Jake finally stepped closer and asked, "Who is he?" She didn't turn, just answered with a low voice, "My brother." The word dropped like ice into the room. Jake blinked, confused. "You never said you had a brother." She closed her eyes. "I thought he died with the others, the ships." Warning lights flashed once, just once, and then went dark again. It wasn't an attack, it was a scan. Someone was looking for them, very carefully. Jake looked at the girl. "Is it him?" She nodded. "He will not fight right away," she said. "He plays with fear first." Jake clenched his jaw. "Then we don't give him time." But the girl shook her head. "It's too late for that," she said. "He has already spoken." "To your kind." Jake's heart dropped. "What?" She turned to him now, her eyes sharp. "He reached your leaders through hidden channels," she said. "He offered them a deal." Jake stepped back, shaking his head. "No. They wouldn't listen to him. They already have," she said. The truth hit him like a weapon. She didn't have to explain it. Jake had seen it before. Fear made humans do stupid things. If they thought giving her up would stop a war, they'd do it, even if it meant sacrificing their only chance of survival. Minutes later it happened. An Earthship appeared, one of theirs. Clean design, blue markings, a peaceful signal. Jake opened the channel with hope in his chest. But the face on the screen wasn't one of trust. It was Commander Rhodes, a man Jake knew from the old days. Cold, clever, dangerous behind a smile. "Captain Carter," Rhodes said smoothly. "Glad to see you're still alive." Jake narrowed his eyes. "What do you want?" "We're here to help," Rhodes replied. "Bring her in, and we'll take care of the rest." The girl stepped forward, calm and still. She didn't react to the insult, didn't speak. But Jake could feel the tension in the air. "No." He said, "She stays with me." Rhodes smiled. "Jake, you don't understand what she is." "Yes, I do," Jake said. "She's not the threat he is." There was a pause, then Rhodes sighed. "You always did pick the wrong side." He said. The signal cut, and 3 boarding pods launched from the Earthship. Jake looked at the girl. "They're coming," she nodded. "I won't hurt your people unless they force me." The first pod hit. Soldiers poured in, guns drawn. Orders sharp. Jake stood between them and the girl, blaster raised. "Don't do this," he said. But they didn't stop. A shot fired, not meant to kill, but it hit her. Jake turned and saw something he never wanted to see again. Her eyes went blank for a second. Then the light returned, stronger, colder. She raised her hand, and the entire ship screamed with energy, metal bent, weapons locked. And the soldiers froze mid-step. Jake ran to her, shouting, "Stop, please." She didn't hear him, not right away. Her power was alive now, angry and hurt. Every part of the ship responded to her pain. The walls closed around the soldiers like a trap. One by one, their weapons melted, their suits crushed. Jake grabbed her wrist. "Look at me," he said. "Don't lose yourself." Finally she looked. Her breathing slowed. The glow in her eyes softened. The walls released the soldiers. All of them falling unconscious. She stepped back, shaken. "I didn't want to," she said. "I know," Jake replied, "but they don't." The Earthship backed away, scared, silent, but the damage was done. They would call her a weapon. Now a threat to control or destroy. And somewhere in the dark, her brother was watching, smiling, because this was what he wanted, to make her lose control, to make her look like the monster he always said she was. Jake sat down beside her. Both of them quiet. He took out the old chocolate wrapper he had kept all this time. It was wrinkled and faded, but still there. She looked at it, and for the first time in days, she smiled just a little. "You gave me that when I had nothing," she said. Jake nodded. "And now," she added, "I have everything except peace." Outside, space was quiet again, but war was closer than ever. And as trust shattered between worlds, one truth became clear. The real enemy was almost here, and only one. Bond stood between him and total control. A human soldier and the girl everyone was wrong about from the start. Stars drifted slowly outside the window of the ship, but inside, time had stopped. Jake sat in the quiet command room, eyes on the empty screen. The Earth had gone silent. No more signals, no more warnings. Only the cold waiting before a storm. Beside him, she stood with her hands resting on the console. Her face unreadable. She was no longer the weak girl he met among the ruins. She wasn't a prisoner, a weapon, or a mystery anymore. She was something far more dangerous free. The screen lit up suddenly with a deep pulse. A shape forming in the blackness. Jake stood. His breath caught in his throat. It wasn't just a ship, it was a fortress in motion. Sharp edges, long shadows, and a red light that bled across the stars. It moved like a god, slow and full of power. And at the heart of it, him. She closed her eyes and spoke one word. "Brother." Jake looked at her, searching her face for fear, but there was none. Only something deeper: regret and sadness buried under steel. The enemy ship sent a signal, a voice that didn't belong to a man. It was too smooth, too perfect, too cold. "Sister," it said. "You broke the seal." She didn't answer. "You've chosen a human," the voice continued. "Strange," it said, "but expected." Jake stepped forward. "Why do you want her?" he asked. The voice replied like it was amused. "She belongs to me," it said, "just like everything else that remembers her name." The queen walked toward the center of the room, her voice calm. "No," she said, "you erased our people." "Not me. You gave me no choice," the voice answered. "They chose you and I was forgotten." She looked back at Jake. "That is his truth," she whispered, a lie wrapped in pain. Outside, smaller ships moved from the fortress, surrounding their location. The trap had been set, but it was too late for fear. She turned to Jake and placed her hand on his chest. "The machines still answer me," she said, "but they follow you too." "Why?" he asked. "Because you gave without wanting anything in return," she said. "That is something no one ever did for me." Her fingers glowed, and light passed into Jake's chest, not hurting him, but opening something inside. The ship answered him now, not just her. Every system blinked, turned, shifted. The control was no longer hers alone. "You're making me one of you," he said. "No," she whispered. "I'm making you something better." The enemy fortress opened its core, powering up a weapon that could destroy a planet. Jake looked out the window, his fists clenched. "We can't beat that," he said. "Not with force," she replied, "but with memory." She walked to the center ring of the room, where the ancient orb still floated. She touched it, and it filled the ship with light. Voices from the past echoed her people. Their laughter, their warnings, their stories. Then Jake's voice joined them. Not words he said, but moments the orb had taken from his mind. His acts of kindness, courage, sacrifice. They played together like a heartbeat. The enemy heard it. 2. The voice of the people he tried to erase, now rising again through a single ship. The fortress paused, its weapon dimming slightly, and for the first time, Jake felt it doubt. The Queen stepped forward and sent one last message to her brother. "We are not machines," she said. "We are not codes to rewrite, or weapons to silence. We are the spark." The enemy fired anyway, a final desperate move. But the ship had already changed. It didn't block the attack, it absorbed it. Light folded in on itself, and the machine reformed, evolved. Energy turned into sound, then into memory. The attack became history, and history became truth. The enemy fortress shook, and systems failed. His voice tried to speak, but it cracked like broken glass. "You ruined everything," he shouted. "No," she said softly. "We remembered everything." The fortress exploded without fire, just silence. And then, stars filled the sky again, untouched. The war was over. Jake fell to his knees, exhausted, but still breathing. She walked to him and helped him up. "You're not like the others," she said. He looked at her, tired but smiling. "You're not like anyone." He reached into his pocket and took out the same silver wrapper he'd kept all this time. "I never thought this would lead to saving the galaxy," he said. She took it gently, held it in both hands, and smiled. "It was never just chocolate," she whispered. "It was a beginning." As the stars moved on, and peace returned to the quiet corners of the galaxy, a human and a once forgotten Queen stood together, not as strangers, not as rulers, but as something stronger, a bond no war could break.